these are our esteemed panelists. We have Doug Bell. He's the CMO of LeanData. Thanks for being here, Doug. And he's going to walk us through some of the main findings. And then the three of us here will have a discussion. Matt Heinz is also here. You probably know Matt, amazing podcast host, president of Heinz Marketing. And I can say the same thing about Mary Shea, another amazing podcast host and global innovation evangelist at Outreach. All right. You know me, I like to try to keep the housekeeping to a minimum so we can get right into the data. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Doug. Doug, if you wouldn't mind, can you share some of the key findings from our study?
All right, Colin. Thanks for the time. I have to say I'm thrilled to be here with Matt and Mary as well. I am jealous, Mary, by the way, of your headshot, the cartoon avatar. I want one right away. But before we get to our conversation with Matt and with Mary, just wanted to tease out some of the information that we found interesting from the study itself. Again, would highly encourage you to download the study. It is ungated, free knowledge in your inbox as soon as you want it. So what I'm going to dig into here are some interesting little tidbits, and then we're going to dig in with Mary and Matt and talk about what we think of the report, and we're hoping to provide some line of sight to everybody who's participating today. So the first piece is we asked the survey participants, we had 1,700 people respond to the survey, and we asked sales leaders what their top go-to-market challenge was for heading into 2022. And number one was still pipeline. And we say still because this is the second time we've done the report. In 2017. Pipeline was a challenge. Well, that continues, probably not a surprise, but I think the thing that was interesting was that only 27% of folks who were surveyed believe that their current lead management solution is effective at supporting their conversion goals. Keep that in mind as we go through. Next slide over, if you don't mind. Thanks. The next is, one back.
Stick.
There you go. The next thing is, yeah, exactly. What lead management capability did survey respondents, what were they looking for most? And the first was, well, they're looking for automation. We're going to spend some time talking about automation and whether or not sales leaders, marketing leaders, revenue leaders in general need it. The second priority they had for them that was a lack of automation was number two, top go-to-market challenge. And I thought this was really interesting in that only 18% of people surveyed believe their current lead management solution will support achieving revenue goals. Let's go to the next slide. And then finally, what are some of the causal factors that might be leading to lower confidence in conversions from leads to pipeline? What might be eroding people's confidence when it comes to converting leads over into revenue? And so here's some tidbits here for us, folks. The first is 2/3 of folks are saying the lead is going to the wrong person. That number is actually 57%. So we still have an issue with getting leads to the right person. We know what happens when that happens, folks. Conversion rates drop, the likelihood of good experience goes away. And it's probably not a shock that we're experiencing that because the number one way of routing leads is manual. So we have people, in other words, teams of people, actually dealing with that lead routing scenario. And the final bit I'll share with you before we dig into the questions today is that 27% of folks don't believe their lead management solution helps them deliver an ideal customer experience. And I would say we just talked about, does lead management help you with the conversions? Only 27% say that's the case. Only 18% think that's actually helping them generate revenue. I think this is the most interesting statistic. And the thing that really would concern me is that we're not creating great customer experiences. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. Our ability to create great customer experiences means we win in the market, we generate revenue, we have conversions, and all the good things that come with it. All right, let's dig in. Mary and Matt, you ready to go?
Do this.
All right, first question up. So we learned right now, folks, that revenue leaders clearly want more automation. But the question is, do they need it? Mary, I'm going to start with you. This is the arc of our careers, right? We spent 20 plus years watching automation take hold. And now I'm asking this question, do people actually need this automation? So Mary, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, Doug. So, well, I mean, as much as I'm so sad to let go of Salesforce Friday, I will say they absolutely do need automation and they know it. And the research that I've been conducting over the last several years shows that they're watching automation and AI as technologies that are embedded into different sales and marketing solutions mature and get to a place where they can deliver measurable business outcomes versus sort of just being a marketing talk track on the front end before someone might partner with a vendor or provider. So they know that automation is transforming the way they can execute against their go-to-market strategies. And they know that sales and marketing technologies are fundamental to helping them make their sales strategies come alive. So absolutely they need it. And yet I'm still shocked every day when I see and hear things that are posted on LinkedIn about companies that are still using manual processes, which this research does highlight.
So it's interesting. I mean, Mary, I think the point you're making here is that if the majority of folks, in this case, we're talking about lead management, are using manual processes of people to automate, then I guess I would agree completely with your answer. But I guess what I'm trying to push on here with you, Mary, and then Matt, over to you next. You're not going to escape this one. Is what's the point of diminishing returns for automation? At what point do you have so many tools in your tech stack that it's about the collaboration of those tools as opposed to adding yet another tool?
Yeah, well, I mean, heads of sales, heads of marketing, you don't want to be your own personal systems integrator. I certainly don't. I've been in those roles, and that's not what I want to do, even though I love technology. We're seeing, from broader trends research that's being conducted by Gartner and Forrester, that the CSO, now their budget, they're saying 70% of them are seeing their budgets increase exponentially, and that is for the ability to purchase some of these leading edge technologies. What I see in the organizations that I work with and advise is that there's two different types of problems. One is they have a number of duplicative point solutions that are in place. So it's not cost effective. There's too much time and effort spent managing multiple vendors, and they don't have a single source of truth in terms of their ability to capture a robust data set. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have organizations where there's significant gaps in terms of technology that could really be transformational to helping their sellers be more effective and deliver a better buying experience. So right now, what I'm watching very closely is, when I think about the sales tech landscape, I think of, 2004 to 2015, it was kind of like CRM was the only show in town. 2015 is when you have the birth of a number of sales technologies that are following marketing's lead, except applying it to a one-to-one versus a one-to-many scenario. And now where we are here is consolidation and beyond, where we're really looking at the platformization. And so that's one of the reasons why companies are starting to reevaluate their stacks and see where the gaps are and where the overlap is. Okay,
I'm done picking on you, Mary. Matt, over to you on this topic. Are we at the point of diminishing returns with automation? And I think what Mary was sharing with us is it really depends, right? It depends on where you are in the stack, depends on where you are in your growth journey, depends on where you are in terms of what you want to be providing to your customers. So Matt, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, what was adequate maybe a couple of years ago is not sufficient today. And I think sometimes we're focused on the wrong behavior and the wrong outcome from that. Lead routing used to be as simple as like, just make sure the lead gets to a salesperson. Make sure that we can do faster sales follow-up. Make sure that there's a process or a sequence of things they can follow up. And look, I'm an outreach customer. I use outreach myself. Just because you've lit up outreach with some sequences doesn't mean you're doing lead follow-up well or well enough. And I promised Colin some hot takes on this. Like, I actually think for companies that have answered that our lead experience and our lead management is fine, or they're okay with it, I think half of those folks are sort of blissfully uninformed, and the other half are sort of falsely aspirational. And falsely aspirational meaning like, it's fine. We're doing it fine. I have other things to focus on. We're doing it fine. Our lead response time is great. We get 99% of our leads get routed to someone, and those are real metrics that people use to say it's fine. And the people that are uninformed are those saying like, it's fine, right? It's fine. My ops team says it's fine. My sales team, they always complain about leads. So what do they know, right? and too often we look at this as a lead management exercise as opposed to a prospect experience opportunity. And if you were instead of saying like, how quickly do we get leads to people, what is the right prospect experience? Like, how do I want to be treated as a prospect if I know, and you should know, that other people in my organization have already engaged with your company, right? Or if I download a white paper, I don't need a 2-minute response time on my lead. Like, I got my white paper, I'm good, dude. Like, if you call right away, that might be counterproductive versus making sure that you're calling with the right message, with the right context, offering additional value based on what you know about what I did and what you see about the opportunity with the account. So flipping this to prospect experience raises the bar to what is okay. And the more conversations we have with clients around that, the more they start to say, well, what was sufficient and what we kind of let go is clearly there are now gaps that we need to address, because we're spending so much time and effort at generating leads. I see lots of scorecards right now. Great MQLs, not enough SQLs. It's in the conversion. It's in treating those leads and opportunities and intent signals correctly and in context to get qualified, reciprocal, meaningful opportunities. Like, this is incredibly important for companies as they adjust in a post-COVID world.
I think you coined a term recently, Matt, as it applies to this. You're talking about how each lead represents an opportunity for an experience. What was that term you used?
Well, I think about the prospect experience, right? And if you think about the individual prospect experience and the account prospect experience, those are a little different. You know, if you've got multiple people engaging with your content and someone finally like raises their hand on something, like, how are you going to treat them different if you know multiple people are experiencing that problem or exploring solutions? Or if you have some people engaging on it and other people, decision makers in the buying committee, not engaging, how are you augmenting the buying experience for those that have not even come to you yet? Right. And so thinking about the overall experience people have, like, think about it as brand impression, right? When they think of your business, like, are you interruptive or are you irresistible? Are you providing value to that individual along a chain of experiences or to the account overall, so that their expectation is I want to lean in with you to learn more about the problem and potential solutions and commit to change? There's a gap there for sure between we got the leads routed and we're creating a good enough, qualified, irresistible enough experience that the right prospects are leaning in further with you.
Okay, I'm going to share 2 stats with both of you. And I wish there was a red buzzer that you guys could hit. We'll just see who responds first. All right. There were 2 statistics that I want you guys to comment on. And I want you to tell me which was the most remarkable statistic. In other words, the thing that surprised you the most. And they are: 1, less than 10% of people that respond to the survey have a lead management solution. Buzzer hand ready, guys. And the other was that less than 27%, this kind of plays off on what Matt was talking about, less than 27% feel like their lead management solution is helping them create a good customer experience. Which of those 2 stats surprised you the most?
So the one that surprised me the most was number 1. That
10%.
Like only 1 in 10 had something in place. I'm like, oh my gosh, that means that 90% of companies are just willy-nilly throwing leads around and hoping they get responded to. That's the one that was most surprising. The most disappointing to me was the 73% of people that say it's fine. Right? Because I mean, there's one, and honestly, I think there's a little bit of sort of respondent bias you sometimes see in surveys when you ask people, how do you feel about this? Like, oh, I'm good with it. Like, they may not be, but they're like, I really don't want to have to deal with this. I really can't put one thing on my plate today. What we're doing is fine. No one's complaining about it. No one's saying it's on fire. So I guess it's fine. And so that, to me, that's the more urgent need, is to sort of, and honestly, you think about prospect experience, like tech tools, great, but like strategy first, process second, technology third. You can have a tool in place that isn't doing the right prospect experience, but shoot, if you're not elevating the way you think about that prospect, and if you really do think your lead management is fine. When I did a LinkedIn question about this after we did the full survey, and I had people writing in saying, you know, if you really think your lead management process is good, like, you're probably fooling yourself. Most of you that said yes, it's fine, like, I guarantee that your sales team and your prospects would probably answer differently.
So you see what he did there, Mary? Did you see that? Pulled in yet another stat. He tipped things in Matt Heinz's favor, Mary. What are we going to do? So, Mary, what do you think between the 10 and the 27%, 10% being the percentage of customers that have, or respondents rather, that have a lead management solution, versus the 27% that are like, yeah, I think I'm actually creating a good customer experience?
Well, I mean, I don't want to get outdone by my colleagues, so I will mention that I just got some fresh data in today that has not been revealed to anybody in the world. And it looks at buyer preferences and how buyers are changing and how they evaluate a good experience. And one of the reasons I want to bring this up is because I really liked Matt talking about the customer experience and the buyer experience, because if we're not tuned into that, you're going to lose that buyer very, very quickly and be disrupted by companies who can actually crack the code. Right now, 61% of B2B buyers across 20 plus industries are millennials or Xers. And so these folks are not going to put up with disrupted experiences across the marketing side as well as the sales side. And so that's one of the big reasons why I think that good enough is not good enough. Status quo is not good enough. that you as a company or as a growth leader need to leverage the people, process, and technology in ways that you've not done before to create that edge or risk being disrupted by companies who can actually figure it out. So that was a long-winded way of giving you my own new stat so that Matt didn't best me. And not specifically answering your question, I found both of them shocking.
Okay. And guys, guess what? I get to have a hot take on this as well. So I'm going to bring in another statistic. I'm going to pull the Heinz. This will forever be known as the Matt Heinz move here. But one thing that struck me was when we asked revenue leaders what the priorities were heading into next year, into 2022. So this is 2021, by the way, when we conducted the survey. So they said, everybody said, we want automation. That was obviously a huge priority. But then when you ask them, well, what are you going to be looking to do in 2022 in terms of actions you're going to take? Number 5, guys, was adding a new tool to stack. And I thought that's really interesting, right? So revenue leaders were saying we need more automation, but I'm not looking to add new tools to the stack per se. So my takeaway there was that this idea of automation is about making all these things work better together as opposed to yet another tool in the RevTech stack. And I'm curious, guys, do you agree? Was that your takeaway? Did you feel like, yeah, people are saying they want more automation, but they're not inclined necessarily to buy new solutions to accomplish that?
Well, I kind of want to know, and what do you think when people say they want more automation? What do you think they're actually really saying, Doug? That's what I kind of want to know.
I think they need better connections between the people, the processes, and the systems to make stuff happen. Sorry, Matt, I just ripped your value prop there, but I really think that's what it's about.
Or are they saying they want more profitable growth? Or Matt, what do you think they're saying? I really want to, because there's, you can say automation, AI, machine learning, there's so many different buzzwords out there. And I think we all know what they mean, but I wonder if some of these business executives, when they go out in search of some of these embedded technologies, that they've really thought about what they expect to get from it.
Yeah, I'll give you a few new stats. I'll do a Heinz. I'll do a Heinz. I don't know how meta that is now.
He's going to run the whole cycle.
I don't know. But I think historically, and by say historically, I mean maybe 5 to 7 years ago, you look at a B2B CMO's budget overall, and the amount of money spent on technology was in the single digits, maybe the high single digits, but it was the single digits. And I've seen some data recently showing the companies that are truly innovating and driving real marketing driven revenue responsible growth, integrating with their sales team, being real revenue partners of the organization. The tech budgets are now in the teens, in the mid to high teens. And where it's coming from, it's coming out of, in a zero sum game. Yes, they may be spending more money, but the percent of media money spent on media is decreasing. So the leading marketing organizations are spending less on renting attention from somewhere else and doing more to increase, to own and earn the attention of the prospects that matter. And technology can enable that. The right technology tools can automate the right parts of that to help your people make better decisions, to help your sales reps have better, richer conversations. I think more technology is going to improve your process, but it has to be based on that level of strategy. And the other piece I would make about that is if you keep buying more tools but fail to integrate them together, you are missing a massive opportunity. I think a lot of companies just focus so much on standing up new tools and literally create an initiative to make sure these tools talk to each other, to make sure that you are sharing insights and intelligence across these tools. So you have a richer perspective and picture of what's happening, not just with those individual leads and those individual contexts, but with the account overall. That's where you can create exponential impact on your technology investments.
Okay, guys, I want to get to the next question. Before we get there, I'm going to start with Mary. I'm going to go to Matt. Mary, you're sitting down with all 1,700 people that responded to this survey. And we've got a sense for what their struggles are, what their priorities are. What's your first piece of advice to these folks with regard to all the stats we just talked about, but in particular, this idea that they don't have a lead management solution? What are you advising them to do?
Yeah, I think the first thing you need to do is kind of take a step back and audit your stack, right? Before you go out and think about adding new tools or whatever, let's take a look at what you have, right? And recent research that I've read out of Gartner is saying that growth leaders are now reevaluating and auditing their stack every 6 months. Can you imagine that? Just because of the pace of change. The other thing is some of these growth leaders are saying they're pretty unhappy with what they have in place. So they know they've got some big gaps. So I would say take a step back and either do it yourself or get some external help or Certainly folks like Matt and myself can help, and there are a number of people out there can help, and look at what you have, look at usage, look at what you're trying to accomplish, understand where you've got commodity types of functionality and overlap and where you're missing something. So in the case of a lead management system, if you don't have that, that's a big and significant gap. So start to figure out how you can consolidate vendors and then bring in strategic partners where you've got significant gaps in the stack.
All right, it's great advice. Matt, your take.
Yeah, I think you gotta go back to like who your customer is, and I hate to use that prospect experience phrase again, but like, who are the companies you're trying to engage? What problems do they have, and what process are they going to go through? Not just to buy from you. Like that's at least that's no more than half of the buying journey is them exploring buying something from you. What are you doing to sort of challenge their status quo and get them to commit to change? And how are you doing that effectively across a body of work, across a consistent, cohesive through line for the prospect, for that individual, as well as people in the organization? And I would encourage anyone listening to sort of suspend reality for a minute, right? Like I think too many companies get so focused on, well, here's what our tools can and can't do. Like, listen, you're never going to have enough tools to do all the things you want to do. Like we will never, I don't believe, unless robots start selling to robots, I don't think we will ever have a complete attribution picture of what happens at every touch point, weighted everything perfectly to get there. Precision is not as important as intent. Like know the right steps, know that it takes a body of work, know that the white paper download or the badge scan 4 years ago isn't what gets credit for closing the deal. And instead think about a combined integrated mentality. Do that from a prospect experience perspective, the individual as well as the account, and think about what is the experience you want to create. How does your current tool set, your current investments, your sunk costs, how do those support a phase one version of that? And then start to make a case for here's how we think we can move the needle for that. And then here's incrementally what we could do if we could enable X, Y, and Z function or capability or experience for your prospects. That can help you make a case for the other tools you need to invest in. And, if you're already talking to the right people, if you're in B2B, you probably have a finite audience. Like, don't go buy them on Google over and over and over again. Invest in the experience, and technology can absolutely enable that.
I think that is a perfect segue. Colin, let's pull up the second question. And what I wanted to discuss with you guys is speed and accuracy, right? And so we understand that speed is nothing without accuracy. But the question I want to get to, and Matt, you really teed this up well, so I'm going to start with you, is ultimately, if we're doing this well, we meaning the revenue folks that are on the hook for generating revenue, we almost have to take a step back and go, revenue doesn't matter. Revenue doesn't matter. By the way, my CEO is in the next room. I just got fired. I'll see you guys later. But the whole point here is this, right? What are we doing to create a great customer experience? So that's what I want to tee up. I'm going to bring it back to you, Matt. When does speed matter and when does speed kill?
Well, look, if I want information from you, then I want that right now, right? And there's a couple implications of that. If I want a demo, or if I have a question that I can't find on your website, or if I have supposed to contact us and hey, I want to schedule something, getting back to me quickly is really important. I'm at my computer or I'm at my phone. I literally am at a device that you can engage me with. I mean, this is partly why I think, Drift and Qualified and the conversational tools are so powerful. Like it's real-time in integration, but it's real-time sort of discovery of what we want. It's also the reason why so many companies are ungating their content. Like if you've got a prospect that is so interested in learning more, that is so invested in and motivated to explore more and to learn more about a problem, why would you put a barrier in front of them? So it's not just speed to response, it's speed to access of information if someone wants it. That said, your responsiveness as a sales team, your ability to get back to someone based on something you see may or may not create the best prospect experience. Speed is not as important as context and value. And if you engineer that prospect experience, the follow-up might actually not include a human at all. It could be an automated sequence across multiple channels that augments the experience. You don't want to call and say, hey, thanks for downloading the white paper. Would you like to see a demo? Like no one ever answers yes to that. They're like, why did you download that white paper? What's going on in your business that made that interesting? What's the context into which you spent time like learning about this? Or, don't ask people what keeps them up at night. Tell them what should keep them up at night. When I see people like yourself exploring this problem, it usually means you have one of three problems. Which of these just made you sweaty thinking about it because it's prescient right now? Which of these were you not thinking about? But now that you know all of your peers are thinking about it, would you like to know more about why? I mean, these are all different threads of conversations that don't necessarily have to happen in real time. But, I think it's sometimes, look, if you're doing a, multi-month or multi-quarter, sales cycle, like the next 5-minute response isn't as important as making sure you've got the right level of next steps, the right richness of information to earn ongoing attention and commitment from that prospect.
Okay, I think we need to create a Matt Heinz SDR bot. It's $1 billion idea, Matt. I'll talk to you about licensing fees later on. Mary, talk to us about this very same topic. When is speed important? When is it more about the customer experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, when you think about today's buyers, they don't want trade-offs or an either or, they want everything, right? And they want that because of the rich consumer experiences they have and all the marketplaces out there that we know and use so much ourselves. So they want it all. I would say I love what Matt said. I love this idea about instantaneous access. You've got people all over the world at any moment in time where they've got an itch that they need to scratch on an opportunity or problem, and they go to your site, they go to your content, they go to your peer review sites, what have you, and they need to find that information instantaneously. And if they don't, the attention spans are so short right now, they'll just go to the next pipe. I think, just to echo what Matt said, I completely agree with it 1,000%, which is if you're a seller and you're going to make some sort of an outreach, like it better damn well, have meaning to it, have insights that are part of it, have a high degree of customization and personalization. And that's where speed to market, if you prioritize speed over quality, that's going to really hurt you in terms of the sales cycle.
Okay, I'm gonna have another hot take question. Guys, red buzzer, ready to go. Here we go. We have 3 things that we need to be concerned about when a prospect is approaching us. All right. Thing number 1 is speed. Thing number 2 is accuracy. I don't have 3 hands. I'm going to do this. And thing number 3 is experience. What's the first thing you're telling your customers, your clients, your prospects to focus on? So again, we've got speed, accuracy, and experience. Which is the most important of the 3? It's an unfair question. I'm going to start back with Mary.
I'd say experience.
Okay, Matt?
I'm tempted to say accuracy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mary, let's start with you. Experience. Why start there?
I mean, I think speed is, and there's an expectation around speed, and it can be a bit commoditized, but I think that buyers today, customers and prospects, want to have rich, meaningful, value-added experiences from the suppliers that they interact with, whether that's, digital content, downloading something from a website, events like these, to their direct interactions with the seller, that they want to have a blue chip, white glove type of experience. If they don't have that, they're going to seek it elsewhere or be disappointed. Now, of course, I mean, the other 3 points are really important too. So it is a tough question.
Yeah, and it's completely unfair. Speaking of unfair, Matt, you said, no, you just meant, Matt, I'm going to remind you. Yeah. You just thundered on for 10 minutes on experience. 10 minutes at least. Colin, did you time that? I think it was 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you just changed your answer to accuracy. Why?
Well, listen, you said this is unfair, and ultimately the answer is experience. But in that moment in time, in that next instance you have to engage a prospect, I mean, you think about this as, I was going to use a bad bowling analogy, right? If you get a spare, your next roll is all that matters, right? And so if that's a terrible analogy, sometimes you got to take the good with the bad. But I think, it's the speed is not nearly as important to me. The ultimate experience is, but the next thing someone sees from you is going to set up whether they are going to listen to you moving forward. Like, you think about the elevator pitch, like your elevator ride is not 70 stories long. They won't listen to you. If your elevator ride is 1 story, do they open up the door running and screaming, or do they say, okay, walk with me and tell me more? Walk with me and tell me more is the breadth of the experience. It's the body of work. The precision with which you can create an accurate and timely and relevant response to what that prospect did or what they asked for, it is accurate in that moment, sets up the opportunity for the experience. So ultimately, experience is still the most important, but I think in that moment, I think accuracy trumps it.
So yeah. I'm going to jump in. Sorry, Doug, and I know I'm not the moderator, but I just want to jump in because I think one thing that could actually change the answer to that question is where they are in the sales cycle, where they are in the buying cycle, right? So depending on whether they're discovering or exploring or digging in more deeply, you could have a different answer based on where they are in the cycle. I don't know how you think about that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And Matt, I want to bring that back to you. Where do you think speed is important relative to where they end the cycle? And where do you think it's maybe less important? It's more about the experience.
Well, I think if this is a considered purchase, if you're doing a long sales cycle, I don't know that speed relatively. I mean, look, if someone has sort of an objection or sort of a contract question, like in the moment, given how busy your prospects are, if they're spending time right now looking at your contract or looking at your capabilities and they have a question, like you might have a small moment in time to keep their attention in that before they rush to their next meeting or rush to the next thing. And so if you respond within 10 minutes, maybe you're more likely to be able to sort of have that conversation and move the deal forward versus if you miss that window, you get something scheduled in 2 weeks, right? And so you have that component of it. And look, I mean, there may be some people here in B2B that are selling very short sales cycle products. Like I worked at a company once that was selling marketing and technology services to residential real estate agents. Like you could do one call close. That was about as close to B2C as you get in B2B. Like in that market, like speed does matter, right? But if you're dealing with a large buying committee and a long sales cycle, I think accuracy and experience still trump speed.
I agree. And Mary, since you gave me the opportunity to answer that question, thanks for being the moderator for a moment. I appreciate it. I have to say, because I want to weigh in. So guess what? I'm gonna. A couple things I point to here. One is that the majority of people that responded to the survey said they actually felt very good about their lead response times. They thought they were spot on. And this is what kills me. And again, I think, Matt, you're right. There's some cognitive dissonance that goes on when you're answering these things, right? But I will point to the second thing, which is 67% of people said it was going to the wrong person. And so let's tie all this together, right? We talk about speed, it's important, but Matt, great point. It's actually maybe more important that we're accurate in terms of who it's getting to. Finally, if you're doing those two things well, and Mary, to your point, in consideration of where people are on the buyer journey, we're much more likely to get to a point where we're creating that good experience. And I have to say, folks, I will tell you, and I'll give a little anecdote here about that experience I had. I won't name the vendor, but experience matters. So I was on a company website, I think $200 million company, so rather large organization. I wanted to get some pricing. I was consulting with a firm. I just needed, a quick answer. It wasn't on the website. I filled out a form, and within I think it was a minute and 30 seconds, my phone rang. And it was this company. Right. And so that was an incredible customer experience. They knew that I needed something immediately, right? They weren't sitting on that. They were with me right away. And that person, by the way, was great. They understood that I'm not buying, I'm representing somebody else. They gave me the due amount of information I needed, but understood I was not the buyer. Great experience. I'm not naming the company, but amazing experience. And I think that, by the way, it was Gong. But, I think those are those moments where you're really like, wow, this is fantastic. And guys, I just mentioned Gong. It was a free brand impression. So there you go. This is why we talk about this stuff. All right, let's move on to the next question. Colin, if you could surface that up for us. I'm going to stay on this theme. Okay, so guys, I feel like we spent some time talking about the utility of lead-centric models. And I think we understand that this idea of account-based selling, account-based strategy, account-based marketing has really changed the picture for your average sales and marketing leader. We're thinking more and more about the account health, right? And so that's creating a transition. That's what I'll call a pull. Right? But there are times as leaders, sales and marketing leaders, we have to push for change. So that's where I want to start, folks. And Mary, I'm going to start back with you. I want to talk about when is lead-centered models, what are lead-centered models a thing of the past? When do we need to start thinking about those transitions? In other words, what's the thing that's going to push sales leaders and marketing leaders into making that change?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that I'm seeing that is going to accelerate that adoption of more of an account and opportunity-based approach, and you're seeing that across the board happening, I think, really quickly, is the number of stakeholders who are involved in decisions now, right? So you've got more and more stakeholders are involved. Many of them are distributed. Oftentimes, they've got competing in different agendas. Then you have a consensus building model to make the decision. And then you've got your CFO and procurement that are weighing in more and more as the economic environment becomes more and more volatile. So it's almost like, unless you're taking an account or opportunity-based approach, I just don't know how you manage the scope of a buying decision these days.
That's a great point. But I have to say, I feel like we're being a little unfair here, folks. We're talking about how the vast majority of folks don't have a lead management solution in place. And we're pulling this and we're saying, gosh, do you really need a lead-centric model? So with this idea of understanding that automation is still key, we still need lead management solutions to help us out. I guess what I'm asking, Matt, is, are we focused on the right thing? Is the lead the right thing to be focusing on as sales and marketing leaders?
Well, I mean, until robots start selling to robots, it's still you and I talking to each other, right? So I think the smart companies are putting a focus on the account for a couple reasons. One, they understand that not all accounts are equal, that we need to understand there's my addressable market, there's my target market, there's the market that's maybe ready to buy based on a problem they have right now. So that level of precision is important. There's taking those personas of individuals and putting them in motion. Two ways: putting them in motion vertically, knowing that there's a buying committee, that there's multiple people involved in making that decision overall, and there might be cohorts, subsets of that buying committee that make small yes decisions along the way, that sort of get to a commitment to change, to ultimately say yes as a group. And then there's the buying journey they go through, right? Which is a combination of getting to a commitment to change and sort of increasing confidence that the change is worthwhile and that there's a vendor that can support that. So having an account orientation is critically important, but you're still talking to people. And sometimes you'll get a group call, but oftentimes you're, as a sales rep, initially lead follow-up, you're just talking to one person. So it is a lead, but you have to understand the context in which that lead exists and the relationship that individual has, the relationship that account, other people at that account have, and the history of people in that account with your organization. That's why I mentioned accuracy, like the precision with which you can come in with the right next step, the right value based on that insight. The better you look, and the better that sets up a better experience.
So I'm going to put this back to both of you guys. Whoever feels like jumping in first, go for it. But I feel like if we were to go back in our time machine to yesterday and we were to rename the webinar, we would rename the webinar, the customer experience webinar. The customer experience, the prospect experience really matters. Now let's put that context together as we think about the different models that we could consider here. So I'm going to go lead versus account-centered models. Do we think a lead-centered model is more or less likely to drive people towards a great prospect experience, or do we think an account-based model is more likely to drive people towards a great prospect experience? Is there one that more naturally services the other?
I look, as big of a proponent as I am to companies taking an account-based approach and the importance of that, the human-to-human element of selling and good marketing is still critically important. We don't make logical decisions alone. We are emotional beings that, don't always buy the best. Sometimes we buy from our favorite. If you put the prospect experience front and center, like, Rebecca chimed in the comments saying, like, if you needed something right away, like that might be a great experience for you, Doug, with that company you didn't want to mention that starts with a G and ends with ong. But, for her, like, depending on the context, it could be super creepy that they followed up. And it could be like inappropriate if you're like, hey, you know what? You sent a submission in via email, but I'm going to text you to try to get you. I mean, staying with their content or their channel preferences also makes a big difference, reduces friction, increases likelihood of engagement. So I think the lead experience, the human experience in the context of the account is the right way to think about prospect experience. And I mean, for the number of bad SDR emails I think we all still get, a lot of people are just thinking about, I've got my sequence set up, I've got my process set up, I've got my playbook built, but is that creating friction or reducing friction with the people on the other side?
Yeah. And Mary didn't want to weigh in here. And I say, Mary, I'm going to take your spot. But what I would say is this, and I'm going to say this as an insider, somebody who's been doing this stuff for a long time, 20 years. I would say that an account-based model typically forces marketers and salespeople to take a step back and think about the health of an account and your overall engagement of the account. And I think that you begin seeing leads in their appropriate context, which is, this is one potential piece of evidence, let's call that a signal, that tells me there might be interest in this account. And when we think about account-based systems, really it's what we're talking about. We're no longer fascinated with how do I turn a lead into dollars. We're thinking about, and to Matt's point, I agree completely, how do I create an experience that's more likely to have a prospect think about us well in the context of that account, in the context of what problem they're trying to solve. So I think we've made it to the Q&A portion. Colin, I'm going to hand it over to you. I've seen lots of questions flow through and lots of items in the chat. So let's kick off there.
Incredible stuff in the chat today. I want to shout out Alan, Ashley, Rebecca. There's a second Matt. Some really cool conversations happening. I want to start here. This was a question earlier from Alan. The essence of his question was, does the pressure on, we were talking about disparate data sources causing breakages in the experience. And he said, that puts a lot of pressure on integrations, and not all the integrations out there between parts of the stack that frankly feel necessary. Not all those integrations are actually great. So does that put us in a position where we should be seeking more, modular packages just from the same vendor?
Well, I mean, I definitely have an opinion on that, Colin. I think we are seeing a predisposition from sales and marketing leaders to want to buy from a core provider that can provide functionality across as wide a range as possible across the revenue cycle or the buy cycle. And as you stick with the modular packages within a singular platform that sits on top of the CRM, then you're able to really extract that data set that sits on that platform as well as the CRM that is going to be accurate and less full of gaps and inaccuracies and things of that nature. So I think there's a real push towards wanting to understand the vision and future of where your provider's going and buying into that and looking at modular functionality across a platform play. We're still early days there, but that's where I think things are headed.
Yeah, I think the term Gartner uses, Mary, is composability. I think that's what we're ultimately talking about. Here's what I'd say, folks. I think that, I don't have the number, but I would tell you that at LeanData, we have a number of great applications in our tech stack or rev tech stack. And I feel like we're not necessarily on the bleeding edge of the number of applications we have, but we have quite a few. And I think that the thing that holds all of those applications together right now are the Herculean efforts of rev ops, right? It's people trying to keep all these things working and connecting together. So I turn this back and just say, if you're worried about this, then yes, think about a way to manage this. Modularity is one way to think about it. The other thing I'd say is, try and get out of this trap of buying solutions or applications for this very, very specific problem you have, and think in terms of broader use cases. A good example of a use case is, I have an high velocity inbound challenge. What are all the things that I need to do to solve for that? What are all the things to collaborate? I have an account-based motion that I need to be able to do better with. What are the tools that need to go together in that? And then finally, Mary, to your point, I would say, how do those tools collaborate? Not integrate, but how do they collaborate with each other? I think that allows you to get out of this pattern of being like, should I go with a single vendor? Or do they have enough modules? Guess what, guys? They don't. It's thinking about those use cases. Matt, I'm curious what your thoughts are here as well.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time. I put a couple of things in chat. I think that, there's a difference between platforms and ecosystems. And I would agree with Mary that, like, if you can find a vendor that has a similar sort of go-to-market philosophy as you do, and they're investing in a product roadmap that aligns with what you're thinking. I mean, it really isn't just about what they have today, but like philosophically, where they're going. I think that's really important. I think expecting one vendor to do everything for you is not going to work for most complex businesses. I mean, if you're a small business, that's kind of important. You don't have the capacity or the team to manage multiple tools. But I would imagine the majority of people on this call are going to need to think of this in terms of an ecosystem, are going to need multiple vendors for different things. And increasingly, like, having a marketing ops team and a rev sales ops team is not sufficient. Like, you need to think of this as revenue ops. Even if you don't have one team, there needs to be a sort of a unifying strategy. Some companies are forcing that by saying, we're still going to have different departments, but you're going to have one budget, right? So figure out what tools you're going to invest in, and figure out where you're going to invest in, not even just tools, but also people to do the integration as well. Know that you are always going to have to do some level of customization to your right go-to-market motion in addition to what comes out of the box with companies with these different platforms. So yeah, the complexity is increasing, but so is the complexity of the buying journey and the opportunity to improve the prospect experience to your advantage.
Don, I love all those takes. Super fascinating stuff. I also want to point out a comment from Ryan. I think Matt and Mary saw this, but in case anyone's not looking at the chat, Ryan said some of the vendors don't want these integrations to exist, and it directly minimizes the value of some of them. And I think that's part of the reason why you see a lot of acquisitions heating up in the sales and MarTech space, because that is the case. But bigger companies know that they can serve more customers by snapping up some of those point solutions. All right, next question. We're going to help one of our community members out here. So this is specific to their situation. If anybody else has another question to throw out, now would be the time. This is the last question I've got. So Ashley Smith said she's serving higher ed administrators, and they're going through a mass exodus and are wildly overwhelmed. And she's looking for advice on, is there a technological approach to cutting through the news and getting the attention of these folks who, it sounds like, have other priorities? In my first instinct was, this is a messaging and kind of a prospecting thing. But I'm curious if there's something I don't know, that there's maybe a technological solution here.
Well, if there's a shared experience amongst people in that sort of persona group, I would say there's an opportunity to create a community of them together. That isn't really about you sharing your message, but it's you facilitating an authentic opportunity for those people to learn from each other, to commiserate with each other, to share experiences. And if you are the producer of that event, even if you're creating sort of a no sell, no solicitation zone, it's, them wanting to spend time with each other and learn from and hear from each other. And, the best part of community is the communing, right? It's not just best practice sharing. It's really sort of starting to care about each other and starting to sort of support each other in those circumstances. I think that could be an opportunity for a stressed and time constrained audience that is going through some pretty significant change.
It's a good insight. Thanks, Matt. All right. And with that, because we're talking community, I'll take one last opportunity to plug the communing that the Sales Hacker community will be doing in the next few weeks. We'll be in Boston, New York, San Francisco, London, and Chicago in late April and early May. You get to see me in most of those cities, some of my colleagues in London. I want to meet you. So come see me. We're going to have some fun, light on content, mostly fun discussions with your peers. So go to saleshacker.com/roadshow22, and I'll see you there. This has been great. I'll give y'all back a little bit of time in your day. But before I do that, I really want to give another huge thank you to our panelists and our partners, really, who helped us with the study today. You need to go check out the full report. We scratched the surface. There's a lot more interesting data and insights and input from other great industry thought leaders in the report. So it's in your inbox. But for now, Matt, Doug, and Mary, thank you all so much for being here and sharing your time with the community today. Really appreciate it.